Well, welcome everyone. Thanks everyone for joining us live today, or for those who are listening to us via a recording in the future. My name is Tammy Tiller-Hewitt, and I will be your moderator today. If you can see the slides, take a shot at the QR code so you can get yourself registered for the other webinars coming up later this year. The QR code will remain on a couple slides, so if you don't get to that one. So if you're with us live today, we cannot hear you, but we definitely want to hear from you. So if you would, inside the chat, if you could put in any questions, aha moment, or useful takeaways, think about that as applause for your panelists, and they'll appreciate that. You can get copies of today's recording in one of two ways. One is I will send an email out next week sometime with the link to the recording. Please share it with your colleagues. And second, we always post all of our recordings on our website at Tiller-Hewitt.com, where you can download them at any time and listen to them over and over again. So you're in for a treat today. I can't wait to hear all of this. And I've heard it a couple times, but I was revisiting the slides today and thought, oh my gosh, I think I missed half of it. So we have two amazing leaders from two super innovative and highly regarded organizations who plan to share great insight about this funny topic. And while it is funny, it is also real, and it is very, very risky. Admiring our problems really has become its own epidemic. It is so easy to fall in line with the us too or the woe is me game. And this game of admiring our problems only creates a spiral of distraction. And again, our leaders are going to share a couple potential examples that they were able to stop and intervene quickly. But the leaders and organizations who refuse to play this game, or they refuse to continue playing, really are the winners. So many of us are falling prey. So for some, it's going to require a real shift of thought and action, which again, you're going to hear some great insight and ways to do that. The real genesis for our leadership webinar series, both last year and this year, is from our over 2 decades of working with healthcare leaders who want to consistently deliver strategic growth and measurable results. We always put the word strategic before the word growth. Diane on the line here today always uses the word smart before the word growth, which I love. Our mantra at Tiller-Hewitt is not all business is good business. And how we do that at Tiller-Hewitt, if you look at this slide, is we start everything that we do now through a strategic growth readiness assessment. Used to, we would get calls from hospital CEOs that said, hey, I need for you to stand up a liaison team, or we need to grow business. And they were pretty much ready to accommodate that business, but it's so different today. There are so many obstacles or challenges around access and capacity. So before we stand up any program today, we always do a strategic growth readiness assessment, which is a very long word for saying we want to make sure the organization is ready for the growth before we open the floodgates with the growth. So we do this strategic growth readiness assessment. We get key stakeholders involved because, as you know, if you don't have the right stakeholders involved with the medical staff, with leadership and management, you're just rowing against current the whole time you're trying to implement. But what comes out of this strategic growth readiness assessment is a strategic growth playbook. And the bottom 3 are the execution engine. Whether it's a play on physician retention or rapid ramp up, we have a physician integration program. If it's a strategic growth program, we stand up a liaison program. And I know that there are many liaisons on the line today. So I want you to hear from my ears how important you are to the execution of the strategic growth plan. And then we have our own software program, which is called Tracker Plus, which is the PRM that the outreach team uses in the field. If you're interested in a demo of that, there is a QR code in the bottom right-hand corner. Or you can always sign up through the website. And then last 2 things are, don't forget about our Leadership Lens podcast for growth-minded leaders, where we've had awesome guests who tell it like it is. If you like what you hear today, tune in because both of the panelists today have been guests on the Leadership Lens. And then last, we have a lot of training left in 2023 for both liaisons and for leaders of liaison teams. So you can see the 3-day workshop and the dates and the 2-day workshop for leaders. So get yourself signed up. That QR code will take you there as well. But today, I have had the personal privilege of working with both of these amazing leaders as we stood up physician liaison programs at their organizations. And I love that neither of these leaders ever shy away from brutal honesty and transparency. And you're going to hear it today. It's so funny when we go into organizations, we get to go behind the curtain. And there's all organizations look like, you know, we always have our act together. Man, you know, we're the envy of everyone, but we all have our challenges behind the curtain. Well, these two leaders don't shy away from telling you what those challenges are. And in reality, you know, they also don't have problems bringing in experts to partner with, because they know that when you put great minds together, everyone wins, everyone benefits. So for me, every single time, and I need to repeat that, every single time without exception, when I'm with either of these leaders, I learn something awesome, as will you today. So their bios, I'm going to have them introduce themselves and I'm going to be quiet. But in the handouts that are in the chat, you'll see their full bios and contact information. So without further ado, I'm going to take down the share and we're going to go ladies first, Diane. And if you guys could introduce yourself and tell our audience a little bit about your organization.
Great, thank you, Tammy. So I'm Diane Moss. I'm the Chief Strategy and Digital Growth Officer for Beacon. Beacon Health System is the largest not-for-profit regional health system located in Northern Indiana and Southwestern Michigan. We enjoy a 62% market share. We grew 2% last year. And my boss said, we're not done yet. And I'm like, you can't grow that much more. And he believes we can. So we are on the path to growth. We're a 6-hospital system with 81 locations, about 450 employed providers, 7,500 employees, and we're the regional trauma center and children's hospital. So I've been here 33 years. And Tammy, it seems like so long ago since we set up the liaison program, and it's still going strong today. In fact, it falls under our smart growth strategy. So I actually still lead that one. So I'm responsible for leading 2 of our 6 strategies, smart growth. I do like strategic growth and how you phrase it, but we still use the word smart growth, and then our consumer-driven culture strategy as well, which is all about transforming the experience for our consumer. And I get hit a lot from a lot of people about why we don't call them patients. And I think it's really important that we call them consumers because they behave like consumers today. And that's part of our strategy about bringing them into our system. So you'll hear more about that as we go through the process, but I'm really happy to be here today. And Tammy, it's perfect timing for this topic. So thank you for hosting us.
Awesome. William?
Okay, Tammy, thank you very much for having us today. My name is William Mahoney. I've been in healthcare for 26 years, mainly rural hospitals. I've done 4 rural turnarounds in a couple of states. I'm part of the Cox Health System out of Springfield, Missouri. We have 6 hospitals. It's a $2 billion system. I'm responsible for our 3 rural hospitals. I'm the president of Cox Medical Center Branson, Missouri. And we have a 157-bed hospital. I have about 1,400 employees here. I'm responsible for our 2 critical access hospitals. And then I have some senior vice president role in the system where I am over the laboratories, therapies, prosthetics, and orthotics, and the fitness centers. So I've kind of, anything outside the main city is pretty much my responsibilities.
That's awesome. And I would be remiss if I didn't also, for all the parents out there, give a shout out. William is also the father of 10 children, 8 of those girls. Anybody been a mother of girl? He has 8 of them, and one just got married a couple weeks ago, right?
That's true. Yep, the 5th one, I got 3 more weddings to pay for.
Only 3, wow. 5 down, 3 to go. And he's still smiling, look at that. He's still smiling, I love it. Well, thank you all again for being a panelist today. So I want to start from kind of warm up the juices from an industry perspective. Why do you think we are or have become so prone to problem admiration? And do you think it's new, or we've just come up with a title for it? And let me also say, William, you're the one that turned me on to this idea, because I know your organization has gone through this painful process of stopping this. But when you told me that, and I don't know if it was on a webinar or during the podcast, but I was like, oh, we've got to talk more about this, because this is an epidemic. So thank you. So what do you guys think? Diane, you want to start?
I think it's easier, right? If everybody's got the problem, you don't have to work on solving it. And so it's easier to talk about why you can't do something rather than work to solve it. And our CEO is really good about telling us we can't do that anymore. In fact, his favorite phrase right now is run faster. And so we're really stopping that, because times have changed, and we can no longer talk about things. We have to be doers. And I think a lot of people have a problem with that. And so you want to philosophize about it and want sympathy for it. But the reality is those days are over. We can't afford to do that.
Well, remember, the misery loves company cliche. I wonder if it has something to do with that. What about you, William? What do you think?
In our roles as leaders in healthcare, we solve problems. And then it's the next problem. I mean, I cut the grass once in a while so I can see something gets completed. And so in healthcare, we get the problems sent to us. Doctors diagnose, administration solves problems. And I believe during the pandemic, it may have been a coping thing. We had all these things coming at us. It was brutal. I mean, just to be fair, it's, there. I also think that it's been accepted by people. Oh yeah, you're right. Healthcare is complex. You guys speak a different language and you deal with, tough issues. And I do believe probably part of the admiration was because it was hard and it was our way of coping.
Okay. All right. So my next question would be, I know, some of the most popular admiration areas are around access, capacity, resource challenges. So what are some of the problems that you are or were admiring? Diane, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think our biggest problem was all around access and capacity. So being a larger health system, capital dollars for us has always been something that's been readily available. So last year was the first time in our history we lost money. And wow, what a shock. And so we had to go on a capital freeze, and we did that during the pandemic, but we really went on a capital freeze last year. And so it was hard for us because we're used to spending over $100 million a year on capital. And we've done some crazy projects over the last 5 years. We've built 2 new small acute care hospitals. We've opened a multitude of physician locations, urgent care, ambulatory surgery centers, imaging centers, you name it. But we've had to make a major investment in our largest hospital, which is a $250 million investment. And that's eaten up all of our capital. And so the rest of us have been all kind of, you can't have anything. And so we've used that as kind of an excuse of why we don't have capacity and why we're limited in our growth. And so we went through a couple strategic planning committee meetings where it's like, well, we can't do this and we can't do that because the largest hospital has all the money. And we finally got to the point where it's like, we can't let that be our barrier. We're going to have to figure out another way to make this happen. And once we turned that corner, we were able to come up with some ideas of how we could continue to grow and provide the access. And I'll share that with you in a little bit.
And is that what resulted in a 2% market share jump, which is huge?
So the 2% was based on some of our previous strategies that we had implemented with some of our new locations. So who knows what will happen based on some of the new strategies.
Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. Nice cliffhanger. All right, William, how about you?
When I hear Diane use those numbers, I am so jealous. We've been so tight as a system for the last 10 years. We had to slow down a little bit, but I never saw 100 million in capital for items. So, maybe we've always been on a Kool-Aid budget. But I would tell you, I think the things that I was admiring, just to be very open, I get vacancy rates of 40 and 50% in my critical care units. I have more locums than I've ever had. Don't even have pediatricians right now. We're trying to find those. I think I admired a lot our travelers. I think I have 40 some travelers left at, $100+ per hour that everyone else has there. The pandemic itself, in the beginning, remember the pandemic, the first 6 to 9 months, we were kind of like the community heroes. People were bringing us cookies. They were all excited. Can we sew you masks? And then it got very political with the CDC and Dr. Fauci. And then people were getting tired of it. And we were still doing the mask thing. And they're like, I don't want the mask anymore. And so the pandemic, we kind of went through different things there. And so, it's like, well, wow, look at us. People are, violence has increased. People are mad at us. And I think supply chain was another thing. I mean, healthcare had a lot of excuses we could make why things were so hard and we weren't doing things right. But there still was another avenue. And like I told you before, it was until someone said to me outside our industry, what's the problem with your guys' industry? And I thought, okay, what? They go, well, you guys need to stop admiring your problems. That's all you guys talk about in healthcare. And I went, whoa, I don't think I'm going to be invited to another dinner party. Better change.
Well, William, we sure went from heroes to zeros in a hurry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. I hadn't really given that thought. That becomes another excuse to hide behind and feel sorry for herself, right? Because, to be the hero was fun for a change, and to lose that status. That's good. So, Diane, can you share some examples of actions that you've taken, and then maybe even include what were the consequences? Like if you didn't do it, what were you going to potentially miss out on internally, or was the competition going to jump in, whatever the risk was?
Sure. So one of the things, and I've shared this with Tammy, you're never an expert in your own environment, right? So you can talk about capacity and throughput and utilization in your environment, but until you bring in an expert from the outside, people really don't listen at times. And so we really had to look at, we had 81 locations across the region, and for years we've been talking about optimizing those locations. So when we got to the capital freeze, what we had talked about is we have all of these locations, and I mentioned 6 hospitals. One of our hospitals is a joint venture, so we excluded them from our assessment. So we knew that we weren't going to get additional capital dollars because we had $250 million going into our downtown campus. So we had to look at our locations and figure out how to use them more effectively. And, like most healthcare organizations, we run our outpatient locations 8 to 5 for the most part. So we looked at hours, and we tried to do this project on our own about a year ago, and we had some limited success. So we actually brought in an outside organization to help us do the assessment, and we agreed to criteria, eight points of criteria, which you'll see on the next slide, to walk through all of our outpatient real estate portfolio. To actually come up with, real estate inputs. Did we have them in the right location? Were they visible? What were the demographics of those locations? Because some of them have been there for years. They came with acquisitions because we acquired two hospitals over the last 5 years. What were the appearances? In some cases, they didn't have our new Beacon logos and signage on them because the acquisition was in the last couple of years. Could people get good parking? And then we had operational inputs. What was the new patient lag time to get in? What was the room utilization? And a new patient percentage, because that was all driving downstream revenue to us. And if you would have asked anybody ahead of time, we had many physicians that said you couldn't get any more patients in or any more providers in. And our management team was saying that as well. So you can see our clinic scores. We actually had 2 of our locations in the green, but 38% of our sites were in the red, meaning we had a long way to improve our sites. And of our exam room utilization, we had a 24% exam room utilization. So we had a lot of real estate that we were paying for with a lot of staff in those office locations, and it wasn't getting used 100% of the time. And nobody's going to use it 100% of the time, but we were shooting for right around 40% is where we were trying to go. And so we went back and we had the company come in, lay this out. It was about a half-day session and really go through each site and talk about the potential. And we set this as what we call level 0 go, which is a corporate-wide goal. All management bonus is on this goal for smart growth for this next year. And we're working towards making sure that we can move the utilization of it and so many of these sites that are in the red and the yellow into the green. So you'll never believe first quarter results come in and we've already blown out our goal for the year, which is a little unnerving to me because it looks like we sandbagged, but the reason, it's not, and I get to present that to the board next week, but we moved multiple sites already just by putting more physicians in to the locations, each location, and expanding the use of the exam rooms, adding more time with the same staff. So this was one where, we said we didn't have the capacity to expand. We didn't have the capital dollars to expand. Now every capital project comes forward with this analysis before we spend any additional capital dollars expanding. We look at this real estate assessment by each site. And so this was one where, it's good data. It's good data to have, and it really puts things into perspective for us. So it was, instead of admiring our problems, we put the data to it and proved that we really didn't have as big a problem as what we thought we had. And this holds us accountable to using our resources appropriately. So it was fascinating to go through, but it forced a level of accountability throughout the entire organization. And
honestly, this is insane. This is literally insane looking at these numbers. It's just looking at what you already had to see this kind of capacity, latent capacity. It's ready to unlock, right? It's right there, but everybody felt busy. Everybody thought they were until you really put data around it. This is, wow, this is incredible.
Yeah. And we do a pretty good job with physician recruitment. So we were able to add primary care physicians and specialists and put them in existing sites. So that part has been good because, we track their next available appointments, and, we had a real issue bringing in new patients to our system, and being able to bring in new patients then, increases market share and helps us from a revenue perspective. So
you were having a difficult time getting patients in when you're showing only 2% in the green.
Yes.
Isn't that crazy? I love it.
Yep. So that was one way of showing that you just need to change your lens on the same problem.
I love it. All right. You want to talk about this next slide, or is that for later?
I can talk about the next one too. So the other thing that we've been really working on is the consumer experience. And we set up online scheduling a couple of years ago, and we actually brought it up during the pandemic.
I was going to say a couple of years ago means COVID-19 time.
During the pandemic. So opened a hospital during the pandemic, and we brought up digital transformation during the pandemic. And so you can see for our online scheduling, we track what percentage of the people that schedule online with us that are commercial. And we're just shy of 79% of the people who schedule online are commercial. Because this is another issue that we had was, getting people to, we had a real issue with people answering the phone and a backlog of people trying to get in, and new patients couldn't get in. So if you look at the numbers on the bottom, in our traditional way of calling the offices, we had about 11% new patient rate. Through the online scheduling, we had a 32% online new patient appointment rate. At one point in time, we were up to 41%, but our capacity of getting new patients in has diminished a little bit this last year, again, just because of you saw the shift in our market share. But people are scheduling outside of normal business hours. I always tell the story. I'd get my letter to schedule my mammogram. I'd carry it around with me for 2-3 months, trying to find time during the day to schedule an appointment. And I'd think about it at 8 o'clock at night. Well, nobody's open at 8 o'clock at night. Now I schedule it online when it's convenient for me. And that's what the data is showing is, 41% of the people schedule outside of normal business hours. And you can see people book on nights and weekends as well. And so you just have to be easier to do business with. And healthcare is not. I mean, we talk a lot in our organization about, be more like Amazon. You can order whenever, they have your information, you get things right away. And we're a long ways from being Amazon-like, but we're moving in that direction. So we implemented the online scheduling, we have the text reminders, we have the digital intake where all of your information is done ahead of time. And we're in the process now of being able to do the financial pieces online as well. So you do your copay before you get in. So part of this is all about just thinking differently and changing your lens. And I will tell you, I was a champion for digital transformation. I took it on 2 years ago. This was probably one of the toughest things that I've ever done in the history of my career in healthcare. And even we all said at the executive level we were supportive. It was the hardest thing I've ever done to get the change management through with some of the digital transformation throughout the organization, because it touches everything.
So conceptually, it sounds easy. Why are we so hard to do business? Why can't people schedule? But you implementing it was an entirely different story. And didn't you say that even your partners in crime there started going down the negative track, almost like you were fighting your own partner? And
yeah, definitely. It was, in fact, we had kind of a look back on it, and I had to talk to a couple of them. I'm like, I've always felt like I was taking the slings and the arrows out, because conceptually, again, everybody agreed with it, but when it hits their areas and it hits their teams, and we're looking at totally changing things and loss of some control, people don't like to do that. And even though that's the right thing to do for the organization, people aren't necessarily on board. So
change is good unless it's happening to you, right?
Yeah.
So I have a question in the chat. They want to know who monitors the online scheduling.
Yeah, the good question. So this report comes out every Monday.
Wow.
And I can see the bigger groups of who's getting it. And we track the percentage of appointments available to be scheduled online, and the number and percentage of appointments scheduled online are all level 0 trackers for us, and goals are set by entities for that. And so
level 0 to you is defined as priority. It means 1 to the world, but levels to you.
And so here's something really exciting for me. So I have a boss, our CEO wants to go completely digital and not allow people to schedule any other way for some of our services. And so we're going to see the first service line, which is Mammo, go in that direction this year and just force everything digitally, which is going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Right.
But we're pretty high in that area today, so we're going to see that. And then probably urgent care, because urgent care right now has about a 40% pre-registration online already. So
awesome. All right, William, now we're going to come to you. Now you talked about what problems you were admiring. Now talk to us about some examples that you've taken to fix.
I wanted to say something about what Diane was talking about here. I think we've learned in our industry, that light's a great disinfectant. And what she's done here with her 2 slides is she's let things out there for people to see. I remember a year ago, we were almost ready to expand an ICU at $12 to $15 million. As we sat down and started looking deeper at the data, we realized we had throughput issues. If we could fix those a little bit, we wouldn't need to spend this $12 to $14 million. And we're having to get deeper and deeper into things like what Diane's talking about. So I thought that was really interesting there. As I said earlier, when someone pointed out to me that, stop admiring these problems, it made me kind of go back to kind of the basics, if you will, that, we're blessed to be in these jobs. I think healthcare is a calling. And as I've got to talk to some people who've retired in our field, they told me I really missed being in that driver's seat and being able to make change happen. So I sat down, I've got a couple slides here. One side I'll tell you is my mental, get my mind right. And the other one was purposeful actions, if you will. So it's a hard job. You have to realize that. And coming out of the pandemic, it's a new day. You can't look back at the past. It's a new day. And so I really had to focus more on mentally getting myself prepared before I came to work. And I was fortunate during the pandemic, I hired a life coach. For the first time in my life, I started to feel a little bit negative. And she helped me to go from, you got to have stillness. To me, that's a morning walk, prayer, not listening to the radio on the way to work. And that stillness gets you to your authentic self. And that's when you make your best decisions. And so invest in yourself. We have to do that. When I come to work, I mean, I have a purpose. Things have to have done what I need to focus on. I think we got caught up in the pandemic. Well, it's the pandemic, supply chain issues, the problems. You can't come. The escalator's moving. You got to keep on that. And then realize as a hospital, we are the trusted community brand. Okay, there. And we got to have actions, create ideas. So you come to work, we're paid to create things and make things happen. And I think when you get in that mindset that there is an answer to the problem, ideas start to come. The one thing to me that really stood out was culture. We were fortunate, our CEO during COVID, we let no one go. We had some physical therapists painting parking lots and we had some things of that nature, but we did not let people go. We need to do what we used to do, be more highly motivated. We've got to get out with our folks. They got to see that things are okay. They got to see that we're in this together. Coming up is hospital week. I will be out there midnight shift serving food to people. I'm 57. It's a little bit harder to do the 11 to 1:30 a.m., but it's so important to our team. Talking to the docs and the patients more, making sure those people closest to our patients and the patients know that we've got their back. We're hearing what they're saying and we're doing something about it. And then I think the biggest thing we have to do as a leader is people need to feel our culture. When they see that, hey, we are dedicated to this mission, we're doing the right things, they can get out of that mindset of the problem, because the problems are there, but they know that you can just lengthen your stride, take one step at a time there. If you want to go to the next slide, Tammy.
Yeah. You know what, William, I feel like what you're saying here is get in the game. Like 100% mind, body, your heart, your head into the game.
Yeah, you have to. And I think this may not be popular to say, but like you said, I'm going to be straight. I think we got in the Zoom and the Teams mode where, hey, I can be in a meeting, but just put my face up there and I don't really have to be there, or I can take the meeting from home. We've got to get back live, relationships, connection. We've got to connect with people, and people are missing that in society. And we're in the business where we can do that, and it's okay. We can be touchy-feely. So, like everyone, in COVID, we had some financial challenges also. We sat down and last year we brought a consulting firm in, and we talked about the main thing we have to do is keep our quality front and center. And there's a question you have to ask yourself: is that going to be about the docs is number one, or our patients number one? So that was important for us to sit down and do. And why are people coming to us? Well, they're not coming to us because of the hospital administrator. I'm sorry to let everyone know that. They're coming to us for medical expertise. And so we sat down with those people that make those key decisions, our doctors, and we reviewed and updated our strategic direction. We gave them more information, kind of like Diane did there with data. And we started coming together better. I think a lot of times we open up modern healthcare, we read the Becker's message of the day, and not saying they're bad, just saying they're not the full scope of what we need to do. So I want to tell you some things we did that openly strengthen our culture, help us be on a mindset of we can do it, and openly, we didn't lose any money during COVID. I'm not saying we set records, okay, but we didn't lose any money. So here's one that we did that was pretty simple. We called the pharmaceutical companies and we said, hey, can we get 340B pricing on our orphan drugs? And for my 157 bed hospital, that was about $600,000. Okay. That mainly, the most savings we received were on neuro, rheumatology, oncology, and GI. But again, you got to make the phone call. It's like me at high school senior. I asked 100 people to prom. I knew one would say yes. Okay. Medicare has things they pay for: the chronic care management, lung screenings, physicals. That's money there. You got to be careful how you do it so that, it qualifies. But there were extra monies there that we stepped into, because some of our Medicare patients hadn't been coming to see us because of COVID and things of that nature. Look at your referral leakage. It's there. Go in your clinics, kind of what Diane and them did, and say, hey, you know, where are referrals going? Ask the docs, why are you referring this? Ask the APPs, why are you referring to this? As we did that and we listened and we acted on what they wanted, we started seeing actually double-digit increases in our surgeries. Okay. Wow. And I think that was a backlog a little bit, and we connected better with our docs. We called our payers and requested better rates. We didn't present ideas. We said, here's our plan, why we need it, step 1, 2, and 3. Some gave us better rates, some did not. But again, 2 or 3 percentage points is better than none. We were in a GPO for a long time that we just couldn't get better numbers. So we reached out to another GPO and we said, hey, you know, what can you do for us? It was a transition that took a little bit, took us about a year, but we saved $10+ million switching to another GPO. Your foundation. We have a hospital foundation. They do a great job on raising monies for us. That's 100% return. I have no other service that has 100% return like a foundation does. Even if you can get $500,000 or $1 million, you know, go do that. FEMA. We put a lot of money out there. I think I've gotten about 8 million. I think we have another 8 or 9 sitting. Hopefully they'll grant. I was asked to go talk to a rural hospital a year ago. And they said, can you give us some ideas? We're going broke. We're down under 30 days cash on hand. So I told them about the pharmaceutical idea, call for 340B pricing for orphan drugs, the FEMA grants, and then I told them about some supply chain things. Gave them the phone number of our people to call. We're not going to do it for you, but here's the steps. A month later, they called me, admiring the problem. Oh, we're still not doing well. Well, my people have told me you've not called them yet. Yeah, but I'm not sure that would work out. Well, you know what? If you don't swing the bat, you're not going to hit it. Okay, there. And then you do need to make sure you have labor productivity standards. During COVID, I think we all got lax that, hey, we need to keep these people here no matter what. And we didn't push as hard. I think we still need to get back doing that better and better. Some areas you can't. I mean, my critical care unit with 50% vacancy, I've got to be careful there. And things. And then I would say also review your service lines. See what services you should be offering. We need to have, it's hard times now. It's going to continue, but I will tell you, just what's on this screen in front of you here, we probably $5 to $6 million, and then the FEMA grant was 8 million over a time. But this was just us reaching out, trying some new things. And that has nothing to do with the foundation money that we're trying to get for some things. You know, so openly, I would say 2 things: get your mind right. You're the leader, push your culture, and then try something. We're doing a lot of things now that we would have never done 2 years ago.
I love it. I have so many questions about this. A couple comments. Man, the basic fundamentals, right? It's almost like we forgot about all this. Some of this is just low-hanging fruit right in front of us that we just get away from so easily. And I know there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen these days. So you're hoping that, you know, the practices are managing that and that this is, you know, but they get away by just managing and what's going on. So I have a couple questions. Service lines you mentioned about determining, you know, what I think what you were saying is what stays and what potentially goes. I know a lot of service lines are getting eliminated now, which is almost a pill no one has had to swallow before.
Well, if you look across our country, what they say in the last 10 years, I think it's OB, 200 OB programs. And if you do go to Becker's and look at their message, you can see almost every week there's 3 or 4 OB programs that are going away because, one, the work-life balance of the new generation coming out. People want robotics. They want more people to help them on call. And in rural America, that's hard. It's hard to get 3 or 4 people in the OB-GYN field to share call in a 25-bed hospital.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of appreciation of rural medicine is so different. And people just think, well, it's just smaller. It's just smaller. It's almost like if you can run a hospital, you can run a practice. I mean, they're just different businesses. So knowing Diane's history, working on the payer side. And then Diane, I forgot what your title was at the hospital or the health system before. You were over all of payer contracting. You still probably are, right?
Yes, I still have responsibility from the payer side. And, in Indiana, we're really challenged these days because legislation is trying to put price caps on the hospital as well. So the payers are using that kind of to also not give increases. So we did go to our payers during the pandemic. We did ask them for help. They quickly said no. So there's definitely challenges ahead, I think, especially in states where certain payers have more monopoly than others, and there's not a lot of competition. So I do think like the value-based side is an opportunity. There's many millions of dollars that can fall to the bottom line from those opportunities and the Medicare Advantage, and even a little bit on the Medicaid side. But in Medicare Advantage, MSSP plans, Medicare Shared Savings plans, add millions of dollars to the bottom line if you're open to taking some risk with that as well. But it's a challenge to work with the payers these days.
Tammy, one other thing I didn't have on here, a lot of our states still have some ARPA money. We've tied some things to some appropriation bills, hoping we can get some monies to help with the new clinic we're building. I've also went to our county commissioners who had a little bit of money left over, presented some ideas to them and got a couple $100,000. And again, our asks are probably going to be larger in a county and city realm. But again, if you bring it as a well laid out plan and who it can benefit and why you want it, you have a decent chance of getting some monies.
Well, most health systems have some rural affiliates, whether they're completely on the books or an affiliation, that these are also things that, work across large or small, but they just make a huger impact on a smaller facility. So Diane, one other question about payers. I know that we used to meet in Indiana when you would be going, or in Indianapolis when you would be going to some board meetings, and you would always talk about the relationships with payers and how critically important. And I think you talked about, used to say one voice, you speak in one voice to the payers. Am I saying that right?
Yep. Yep, and we still work extremely hard on our payer relationships. And when we negotiate, we do negotiate with one voice because you do not want anybody to divide and conquer. I never have our CEO in any of our payer meetings because he doesn't need to be. So that's why we develop the relationships with the payers. I do the negotiations. If we do need to, rally outside the meeting, it's usually with the CFO. But yeah, we definitely work hard on those relationships. So when you do need to make an ask, that you can get to the level of the organization with the payer that you need to. We regularly have joint operating committee meetings with them where their CEOs do come to our meetings, but generally it's at my level or CFO level that we hold those meetings with, and we don't bring, because it's not a board decision. And we don't want it to be at that level. We don't want it to be the political decision. But yeah, Tammy, I still go to Indianapolis for those meetings and keep those relationships up.
So thank you. So I'm not surprised one bit, William, that it's you at your organization that has the payer relationships, because you're such a relationship guy. And, but how cool is that you were able to get some better rates?
Yeah. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, well, we do have people in our network who do more of this than I do, to be honest with you. But openly, we did have some contracts that were coming up, and historically we'd gotten, I won't use numbers, so we're not supposed to do that, but we got numbers that weren't satisfactory, and we just said this time we're not doing that. We have to have better than this. Our labor has went up, 10%. Our supplies have went up 10%. We started on our admiring problems list with them, and but we showed them what we need to do, and they came back and said, hey, would you guys be willing to take some risk in some areas that you weren't before? I mean, there was a little bit of give and take, but openly we knew that we were going to have to, on some of these contracts, we were going to have to stand hard, just because we were so off on what we needed, where we need to be.
Yeah. I had a neurosurgeon say once, it's not a negotiation if you can't walk away. So I love that part, what you said. And then the GPO switch, wow, that's interesting too.
And again, it was large, but we went, and if you're an independent hospital, you can still call these GPOs, the large ones, and say, hey, is there something we could do with you? Show them what you're thinking, not make them do all the thinking, okay?
Right.
Bring that plan there. But for us, we got $10+ million guaranteed the first year.
Wow.
Great.
That's huge. That's huge. Okay, so what about consequences? If you guys wouldn't have, I mean, you know, I don't mean to be Captain Obvious here, like, well, if we didn't do this, we wouldn't have that multi-million-dollar, but what are some of the deeper consequences if you hadn't stopped admiring and looked from within and got back to the basics? You know, I think William, what you were saying is this is a contact sport. I mean, people better get in the game and start, you know, you said you use hit the ball, contact. So what are some of the consequences? William, I'll go back to you.
Well, the game's not slowing down. There's challenges there on our days cash on hand. We've got new people coming into the market and they want the patients, and they want the patients who can pay, which means they will leave me with the patients who don't pay. And so openly, we've got to change where the kind of the Gretzky thing, where the puck's going to be. It's never going to go back to where it was. The new technologies and things of that nature, you're going to have to, your quality score is going to have to keep improving, which is awesome. That's the right thing to do for the patient. You're going to have a bottom line, and you're going to have to be uncomfortable. But if you think about it, we never grow in the comfort zone.
Yeah.
Even though we don't like it, we don't grow in the comfort zone. And openly right now, if we would have stayed and our team had not done those things that I have on that screen, we would not be profitable. We would not be building a new clinic in an area where we need to be. And, you know, probably might not be in my job in 6 months because I'm paid to produce.
Okay, it's good. Diane, how about you? What are some
Yeah.
consequences?
So I think along with that is we had to come to the conclusion that the pandemic accelerated a lot of the things in healthcare. I mean, the push to the outpatient basis, the consumerism movement, a lot of disruptors got into healthcare. You know, the payers are now competing with us. You know, you've got the Amazons, you've got the CVSs, you know, the One Health. Everybody's competing, and they want the more profitable business. Nobody really wants to take care of the Medicaid population, and we've got a lot of Medicare, at least in our market. And so the commercial population has become a smaller piece of what's available. There's nobody to shift the cost burden to. And so what we had to quickly come to is the levers that worked in the past no longer work. So it wasn't just about cost reduction anymore. It was really about transforming how you provided care. And once we got there, that's where we really needed to look at, like, how are the clinics working? Is everybody working to the top of their license? Are they really productive? Could we provide services at every location? So we really had to go through and really look at things through different lenses than what we ever did in the past. And I think really get over the fact that we lost money and that we were heading down the path to lose money this year unless we completely shook things up. We actually locked ourselves in a room off-site. I think we were in there for 13 hours until we came up with our plan of how we were going to hit the financial goals to bring ourselves back to profitability. And it's not like we look for a huge profit margin. This year, we're looking for 3%. And so we had to come up with what those financial targets would be. And you're not going to cut your way to profitability. It's just, you can't cut enough, quite frankly. So you do have to change the way you do business. And I think that that's something different for healthcare, because in the past, you know, you cut supplies, you cut a little staff, you maybe eliminated hours in certain areas or cut a service line. Those aren't big enough anymore. The dollars are too big. And quite frankly, while we have a very deep balance sheet, they don't last years and years. And so we really did have to make a change. And I think what people are seeing now is organizations are getting downgraded. We were fortunate that we did not, but many people around us are, and they won't have the ability to grow in the future unless they bring themselves back to profitability. And so it's just a change. It's a mindset change.
Yeah, So we're back again, William, to your mindset. Again, I think people just sometimes think, oh, that basic stuff is just fluff, but it's actually the foundation on which we build, right? Everything else afterwards. So I love you can't cut your way to success, which I feel like has been a mantra for so many years, that it's real, it's super real these days. So if you had, let's just say we have some aspiring leaders on the line here, that if they could just do one thing, really, it doesn't even have to be aspiring leaders, because so many organizations are actually paralyzed right now. They don't really know what to go. So everybody leans to either the admiration or the cut mode. Like if they just feel like they can't get their head around the growth mode with their current situation financially. So what would you guys, if you were to give one tip to your colleagues, what would it be to start the kind of the new way? Diane, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's an overused word, but I would say transformation. And I'd look at transformation from the consumer experience to keep them loyal to you, transformation in the physician offices, really looking at top of license, and then really looking at transformation around the workforce. And so we talk a lot about artificial intelligence and where and how we can use that, because we have to automate. And so that's really what we're focused on in a big way, is the whole transformational initiatives that will help lead us to the future.
So if they've never had a culture or really a mindset of transformation, like there's nobody on my team that even thinks this way, what do they do?
I think you have to find the leader that does think that way and start to bring in training on change management and how to get there, because you can't do it with one or two people. You have to start to bring that culture in and teach people how to do that. And I'm not saying it's easy. It really isn't, but you have to start somewhere. Pick a project and get it moving. And I would start on the front door. In getting the patients in, because the patients who can go somewhere else if you're not easy to work with.
Yeah, you've got to be the path of least resistance. You win business even if you're not the best, just by being the easiest. You said something that you're really talking about consumer loyalty. I know that I was listening. SG2 has a big consumer loyalty initiative going on, which is mind blowing. But one thing, and William, you might like this being over PT across the system, is they discovered that physical therapy is one of the service lines that has the #1 connection to consumer loyalty. And I don't know if it's the frequency or just the overall amount of time you're there one-on-one with someone, if that's what it has to do with, but no, it's like this hidden gem that, we don't really look at physical therapy. It's more as a needed service line. But as we're looking at our consumer loyalty, transformation, make sure you're also keeping an eye on physical therapy, because there is such a tie to consumer loyalty. So what about you, William? One thing you could tell your colleagues.
I go back to, you get close to the consumer. That's what you're here for, that make it easy to practice them. I remember 6 or 7 years ago, I was at a prominent health system with my son who had a health issue. And I went up to the 5 specialists that he had to go see. And I said, why do you practice here? Ego, you get paid a lot. And they said, no, it's an easy place to practice medicine. And if we can make it an easy place to practice medicine, the patient's an easy place to get access to, navigate us. Remember, we're still, if we don't want to believe this, but we're still a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 entity. We've got to be the same at nights and weekends and holidays. And so go back to your original word, Diane, that's a transformation. We're going to have to do that. If not, somebody else is. We have control now. We won't have control in the future if we don't keep connected to the source of why we're here, our consumer, our patient.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the payers want to own that patient relationship. And if you look at all of the tools that they've put into place and the telehealth and their portals, they're trying to be the loyalty with that patient. And they've done a good job of it, right? To be the source of information, the source of, what it costs to get healthcare. They've made us out to be the bad guys. And we've not done anything to impact that. And so we need to be the source of information. We need to be easy to work with. We need to be able to tell somebody what it's going to cost to provide healthcare. And we've not made it easy. I mean, the transparency on the websites, oh my gosh, that's not easy for people. So the payers have taken on that role as well. And so I do think as we look at that whole consumer experience from start to finish, and I do mean finish, all the way through to the billing part of it, because you can
Yes.
provide all of this and then totally mess it up on the back end of it. Has to be easy and has to be a good experience, and then follow it up with the personal information and keep that loop, that circle going. And it's not easy at all. I don't think anybody's doing it really, really well. I think it's just beginning for healthcare.
Tammy, is interesting. One of our communications professionals told me last year, she said, William, you got to realize something. We don't perceive how we're seen by the public. She says, we should be the adults in the room when it comes to healthcare. And I thought, I can understand it when you put it in the kid adult thing. I've got some practice there. But again, I do not believe we're as self-aware as we need to be about how the consumer feels.
Which is really sad because the vast majority of us have been a patient or know someone who has, and we know the horror stories and we're just like, I know, isn't it awful? You know, I have a 24-year-old nephew at stage 4 colon cancer that then reoccurred. And just his walk through the St. Louis market was one nightmare after another. There's no one owning the care. There's no champion, there's no navigator across specialties and service lines. I mean, when you have cancer, you're in oncology and radiation, you're in imaging, you're in surgery, and there's no one championing this. And, I think we forget that we know how to navigate because we work in it. We work behind the curtain. We know people we can call, but the vast majority don't. And so they're just suffering through it, trying to find their way while they are suffering with whatever it is they're, inflicted with.
Yep.
And then when that happens, guys like me put their phone number in the newspaper. So, hey, it at least comes to me and not my board.
Oh, good for you. Did your phone start ringing?
You get called 3 times a month. Concern, a compliment, and a complaint. People don't abuse you. I've been doing that for 11 years now.
Wow. That's awesome, William. That's amazing. All right. So final thoughts, you two unbelievable leaders. What are some final thoughts that you have about really going through the process of identifying, stopping, fixing, and now a lot of times it's like weight loss. You think the diet's the hard part, but really it's the maintenance part that's the hardest of all. So now with all the changes you've made, how does that get hardwired? So everyone is accountable. There's a leader championing it. So people like, well, they took their eyes off the wheel. They won't watch us. We can slide back. What are you doing around that?
Yeah. So Tammy, at Beacon, and I've talked to you about this before, we hardwire it into our strategy process and what we call our quarterly results review. So every quarter we go over the results review with the leadership team and our broader management group. And if you are in the yellow for 2 quarters or in the red for 1, you are submitting an action plan and getting up in front of the leadership group and telling us what it is. So it is hardwired into our system so that you don't backslide. And it's, the first time you're in front of the group, we're pretty nice. The second time, not as nice. So people don't like to have to come to QRR to go over the results. And so we do have it hardwired. And then as a strategy owner, it goes to the board. And so if I'm in front of the board going over it, then I'm really not too happy when I have to go back to those teams because we're judged on it. So we do have it hardwired. And it doesn't mean that we don't backslide a little bit, but we do get the action plans and try to bring it back into line.
But you've built in an accountability system. And honestly, I feel like that's where we fail most, is that part of it. So that's great that talk about crossing the finish line, that accountability system. How about you, William? How do you hardwire and make sure that there's not backsliding?
Yeah, I think 2 things. We're doing something exactly like you're doing, Diane. We're going from small A accountability to big A accountability. You're going to come in front of the group and you miss, and we're all accountable to each other. And we're going to have these discussions. And also my level, I'm at a board meeting. We go over the pillars. We go over these things. And our enterprise scorecard is there every month. Everyone gets to see it. And if you're not in a good area, you got to explain to your peers why you aren't. And I think on the other side, it goes back to what I said earlier about our authentic self. This may be too soft for some people, but to me, we're in a calling. And in this calling, we have the privilege and the blessing to help other people. And I believe deeply in prayer. I believe that this is a tough job. We can't do it by ourselves. But I do know if we're working together and we try to do the best we can, just good things happen in our field. We need to spend more time reading those nice letters that we get, because we do so many great things. And too many times we get stuck in that column of admiring the problem, but we still need to be accountable.
Right. Well, I've asked the questions as they've come in, so I appreciate we're at our time limit. So Diane, William, thank you so much for all of your insight and sharing your stories about your organization so transparently. So thank you everyone for attending, and we'll see you on May 10th at our next webinar calling Disrupt Yourself, the Strategic Growth Imperative. Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.